Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Once again, we are going to talk about international affairs. Geopolitics is important, geoeconomics and geosecurity. And remember, while we keep on breaking down all these parts into various aspects and we keep on emphasizing certain aspects a lot, it is important to remember that the main purpose of any body like the UNGA or United Nations, where UNGA session is going on, the purpose is basically to ensure that there is collective security. Of course, then we know that there are political aspects which keep on dividing these bodies, but the idea of collective security is very important. When President Joseph Biden of the US actually addressed or made his maiden speech at the UNGA, he especially pointed out that there were commonalities to actually assert, and he actually statedly pointed out that in coming days his administration doesn't seek any Cold War, even though there are differences among nations, but there are commonalities as well. And the challenges, as we keep on pointing out in this program as well, are really big, and they are collective. But we have seen that after Afghanistan withdrawal, the way American media and American think tanks actually reacted to the withdrawal, that actually really wounded America's image rather than the withdrawal. Whenever you start a war and whenever you end a war, it is going to be always messy. But now American pundits actually keep on asking whether America is any longer the world leader or not. We are going to discuss that. And remember, yesterday we actually discussed at length AUKUS and how that has created a new rift between France and the three members of AUKUS. And after that, we also pointed out that it might alienate Europe as well. But then, after our show actually finished, there was a phone call between, President Macron of France and President Biden of the US. And the good news is that there seems to be a thaw, and the French ambassador is returning to the US, to Washington. We are going to talk about all these matters. First of all, there is a package our team has prepared for you. Let us first watch it, and then we are going to come to the discussion.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world.
In his maiden United Nations General Assembly address, President Joe Biden laid out the future direction for United States of America. The question here arises, will United States be able to hold its dominance over the world? His address has been characterized as traditional by many analysts, departing from the isolationism and confrontationist approach of former President Donald Trump. Announcing the end to an era of endless wars, he stressed on the need for relentless diplomacy. The AUKUS controversy illustrates that even the closest of allies can become estranged when commercial concerns are at stake. However, President Biden and President Macron have talked over the phone and agreed to dissipate tensions. Without naming China, President Biden said that the US does not want a new Cold War with the most populous country in the world. But he added that the US was looking to compete vigorously with the world's autocracies. He said the US is turning its focus to the Indo-Pacific region and is fixing its eyes on devoting its resources to the challenges that hold the keys to the world's collective future. It appears that in their desire to hem in China, the Western Bloc is prepared to open up a new front in the Indo-Pacific.
Right, so you have seen the package. We are joined by an eminent panel. One guest will join us later, but in order to help us understand these issues from DC, Washington DC, we are joined by Michael Kugelman, who is Deputy Director and Senior Associate for South Asia for Wilson Center. Thank you very much, Michael Kugelman, for being part of the program. Anwar Iqbal Saab, a senior journalist, and also, to me, people like me, he is an institution, also joins us from DC. Thank you very much, Anwar Iqbal Saab, for being part of the program. In the studio, I'm joined by Shakil Ahmed Rami. When it comes to think tanks and expertise, he is our China hand here. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Let me start with Michael Kugelman. At this moment, I noticed that recently there was a briefing to the Congress, a secret briefing, and there both parties' members actually walked out in protest. Why is it that the American elite have not been able to understand that the nature of threat and the nature of political power is changing, and they'll have to adjust accordingly?
Well, thanks for having me as always, Farrukh. That's a great question, a very difficult question. I think if you look at the current world order and the U.S. place in it, even with the debacle that came with the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and even with any damage that caused to U.S. credibility and the U.S. reputation in the world, I think that at least for now, on a very literal level, the U.S. continues to be the world's superpower. And what we've heard from the Biden administration is that the U.S. wants to ensure that continues. We've heard this messaging from the Biden administration that it wants to restore U.S. alliances and, even more importantly, restore U.S. leadership. And I think that the idea there is to distance the Biden administration from the policies of the Trump administration, which, according to the Biden administration, suggested that the U.S. was no longer interested in leading in the world. And there's an irony there, because I would argue that that President Biden's challenge of doing that, restoring alliances and restoring U.S. leadership, have gotten even harder now because of his own doing, because of the major failures in Afghanistan and what happened with the withdrawal. So it's going to be even harder than it already was. So if you look at just events of the last few days, if you look at the AUKUS agreement, clearly this is a new agreement that highlights the U.S. It highlights how the U.S. continues to be perceived by some of its top allies. The U.K. and Australia were willing to sign a new security pact with the United States, and we have heard that the negotiations leading to that agreement happened over a period of weeks, which means that even when the U.S. was suffering all kinds of problems in Afghanistan, and when you had the chaos during the last few weeks of the withdrawal, negotiations were underway for this major new security pact between the U.S. and two of its closest allies, which of course was concluded just over the last few days. But certainly China's rise is inevitable. It already has risen, in fact. It's not right to describe it as China's rise. It has risen. It is here. Its economic power continues to grow. And that will pose a challenge. It does pose a challenge to the U.S. This is the U.S.'s top foreign policy priority, this competition with China. But I'm not sure I'd go so far as to say that you have a Cold War emerging, just because there's a lot of nuance in terms of how the world looks at that rivalry between the U.S. and China. Plenty of countries, including in Asia, want to have good relations with both the U.S. and China. Even some U.S. treaty allies look for a security partnership with the U.S., but see China as an important partner because of the economic support that it can provide. So It's clearly a very complex state of affairs in the world.
It is very complex. And Michael Kugelman, I come back to you in a short while with a theoretical question, a question about theoretical frameworks. But let me first go to Anwar Iqbal Saab. Anwar Iqbal Saab, you're in Washington. You report on these things as well. It seems at this moment everyone is doing his own gig or his own stuff. For example, Richard Haas, the head of CFR, actually wrote a piece recently, and he proposed to supersede the UNSC with another body, out of which he excluded UK and France, and included Japan and India as well. Why is it at this moment America itself is talking so much about its own decline?
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that America is talking about its own decline or what Richard Haas said actually represents America's thinking, official or unofficial. I mean, all sorts of ideas that are floated here and that are discussed, and some are actually accepted. Most of them are discarded. I think in Pakistan, we should not make the mistake of seeing U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan as America's defeat. It is not America's defeat. America has not lost the war. There never was any great desire in America for staying engaged in Afghanistan. It was not a very popular war. It was not like Germany invading Europe and America and people in America feeling the need to get involved. Nobody ever felt the need to actually send troops and keep troops in Afghanistan for 20 years. So we must see it from that perspective, that it was an unpopular war that American rulers have been fighting for the last 20 years against the wishes of the majority of Americans, and ultimately they had to give in before the American public opinion and withdraw the troops. I think if we see it otherwise, if we see it as America's military defeat in Afghanistan, we'll be making a mistake.
Right. Anwar Iqbal sir, as we speak, a short while later, today, tomorrow, there's going to be a meeting of Quad, and my Indian Prime Minister is going to meet President Biden as well. Earlier, we were told by our Indian friends who are expert on these matters that Quad is essentially a strategic alliance. Now we are told that because there is AUKUS, Quad is more an economic and political alliance, or perhaps international relations alliance. What do you make of this sudden shift in the rhetoric at this moment?
But has there been a shift? I mean, America, after all, is selling a nuclear submarine to Australia, right? So that is a military, that is a strategic as well. I mean, now see, there is a change in the sense that Americans do not have much of a desire of staying engaged in South Asia, so they are moving to other regions where they think they need to pay more attention to. And obviously, the Indo-Pacific region is one of them, because there is definitely a desire here to contain China. Whether they acknowledge it or not, they do want to contain China. And in doing so, I mean, they just don't want to do it alone. They don't want to send troops somewhere, because there's no place where they need to send troops. I mean, there's not going to be a physical fight between China and America. It will be a sort of a war of nerves where both sides will try to expand its influence. And in that sense, America has already marked out its allies in Japan, India, Australia, New Zealand, who are very willing and ready to stay on America's side. So I think we see more of these kind of alliances on both sides.
Right. Let me come to the studio, Shakil Rahme Saab. You're an expert on China. And a big question at this moment is that the way China is being projected in the Western world, their media, their think tanks, others, is that the clash between China and America is set in stone. When you read the Chinese opinion, when you see how they are responding, are they cognizant of this? Do they think that it is something which is a certain outcome and there is going to be a clash, if not clash, some kind of competition?
I think the Chinese are well aware of the situation, and they know that there would be a very tough competition, and they hope it would mean the competition. It should not move toward anything. Because
when you say competition, just qualify, you are talking about economic, technology, or military one.
So they are, at this point of time, if you talk to Chinese experts and the Chinese people, so they are concentrated on one thing. They say the future of world is same. They say the community with shared future. So we should compete for the betterment and economic linkages. So who is better, they can. But the linkages or the competition of that economic linkages should be based on the mutual beneficial linkages. Not should be like that one nation is getting everything, other nation is not getting anything. Because they, in their philosophy, this is not a sustainable, because whenever the other party will have the chance, they will come back to you. So there should be mutually beneficial. One thing, and second thing, And Chinese they are also they are cognizant of the fact, whatever they do, but the West will not be satisfied with that.
Okay.
Because if you look at the European Union strategy paper or strategy policy in 2019, they categorically say it's a strategic competitor. So that means they are qualifying it to go for anything.
Right.
One thing. And second thing, so as we remember that Donald Trump has said in his press conference, said we will never allow any country to surpass USA in the technology, the future technology.
Okay.
So China is not going to give up on that, because if you look at that World Economic Forum or other forums, number of the patents coming from the China, now they are leading. If you look at their new strategy, new circulation model, new philosophy of the development, high quality development, eco-civilization, they all revolve around two things. One is innovation, and that second is the leadership in technology.
Right.
They are very swiftly moving to from the factory of the world toward the laboratory of the world.
Yeah,
That is very
R&D,
key.
leadership in R&D.
R&D, and look at their allocations. It is around about 14%, I think, in this 5-year plan of the total GDP.
Okay.
They are bringing huge money in R&D because they have made it focus. If we have to be the global power, we need to work on innovation and technology.
Okay.
So they are working on it. One thing, and second thing, if we look at that, China is very confident at this point of the time. They are not they are not being bothered by what the West think about them. There's very important economic reason.
Okay.
Look at their market size, 1.4 billion.
And they are opening the
And they are
market
opening.
as well.
Second thing, up to 2035, they will graduate 600 million people to a middle class.
Okay.
And from middle class, they will graduate 400 million people to the upper class.
Yeah.
If you calculate only for a middle class, a $20 increase in their spending, that means it will generate the economy $1.2 trillion.
Right.
Add that up to 2020. They are very confirmed that if even the West is putting the ban on them and they're making like their things difficult, they will be able to become the biggest economy of the world.
Right.
If we look at toward the West, US population is only 33 million.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, 330 million people.
Yeah.
They can.
For a second, you gave me a turn.
Sorry for that. But 330 million people.
Okay.
Even that is less than the population, but they are graduating towards the 600 million people to the middle class.
Okay.
So they need new partnerships.
Yeah.
But the partnership, their mentality is to getting the maximum of the alliances.
Yeah,
Chinese
but
are not.
my concern, with due respect at this moment, is the way Russia has actually invested in RT, convincing the West that it is essentially not an enemy, right? I see China's capacities and their ability to actually work with everybody, but I don't see the effort to woo a common citizen all over the world, right? Especially in the US. I'm going to come back to you, and we can talk about other aspects as well. Right, and Michael, I'm going to come back to you as well. I'm told that Anwar Iqbal Saab has to leave early, so I have one question for him regarding UNGA and the Prime Minister's decision to actually address it from Pakistan rather than going there. Do you think that his participating in the session physically would have been better, or his address is what matters and he can do it from here?
I think this is a wise decision. There was no need for him to come here. First of all, because of COVID-19, access is very limited. People, I mean, if you go to the UNGA, it doesn't really look like a general session. It is all deserted. Even the cafeteria is closed, so you don't get the type of attention. I mean, like, the advantage of going there is that you meet a lot of people. You meet other heads of the states. You meet other delegations, and all of that is not happening. A lot of people are still scared. You must have read about the Brazilian foreign minister or some minister, perhaps the foreign minister or some minister of something, who tested positive for COVID-19 after coming to the UNGA. So that's one thing. The other thing is that these next few days will be dominated by Modi. He is in Washington. He is going to New York. He'll be meeting a lot of people. And then whether he wanted or not, our Prime Minister would have been forced to compete with him, and that wouldn't have looked nice. So I think and then again, because of Afghanistan, he might have gone to a think tank or in a meeting with media. Afghanistan would have been the focus. They would have asked a lot of pressing questions about Afghanistan, and Pakistan obviously want to appear as Afghanistan's spokesperson on the world stage. So I think it was a wise decision.
Right. On that note, let me thank Anwar Iqbal Sahab. Anwar Iqbal Sahab, thank you very much for your precious time. We take a break here. When we come back, rest of the panel, Michael Kugelman and Shakil Drame will continue. And we will be joined by another guest representing views from Russia, Dr. Andrei Kortunov. We take a break. When we come back, we are going to resume the discussion. Take a break. Welcome back. Before going to the break, I told you that we will be joined by Dr. Andrei Kortunov, who is Director of Russian International Affairs Council. He joins us. Thank you very much, Dr. Andrei, for being part of the program. I'm going to come to you, sir, but before the break, I said that I'm going to go to Michael Kugelman. Michael, one aspect that keeps on actually staring us in the face at this moment, perhaps there is not that much unity among the pundits. That actually comes back to the fact that the theories keep on dividing us. At this moment, it seems that everyone believes that we are living in a different world. Is it not important to realize that all these countries that talk about their capacity and they talk about their future, that they have a collective interest to work together?
Well, absolutely. And this has been one of the major challenges with the world order in recent years, that efforts to strengthen multilateralism have really struggled. And we know that during the Trump era, there were major blows to multilateralism. And there have been some new initiatives, mainly launched in Europe, to promote more cooperation among countries, and they haven't gotten very far. And yet, it's very troubling because these blows to multilateralism have happened at the very moment when you're seeing these emergence of some of the most serious shared global threats that we've seen in years, right? If you're talking about worsening climate change effects, and if you're talking about pandemics, we've seen that now.
Yeah.
And so I think that this really cries out, there's a crying need here for there to be a change in the world order so that there could be more multilateralism. So there's such dominance on the U.S.-China rivalry, and for good reason. That's going to be the case for quite some time. But I think the bigger question is, how do all the other countries respond? And I think that if we start talking about U.S.-China Cold War and, two camps policy of countries lining up on either the Chinese or the U.S. side, that's not going to help efforts toward multilateralism by any means, especially given how there's never been a more important time for multilateralism to work. And I think that, say what you will about the Biden administration, but I do think this remains one of the administration's goals, is to figure out ways to spark more manifestations of multilateralism. And that goes beyond cases of the U.S. trying to strengthen its relations with NATO and with its Asian treaty allies. There's going to need more than that. And this is why I think that Biden has been talking so much about the need to focus on climate change and working with everyone, including China, to figure out ways to address these, figure out ways to tackle these shared threats. So I completely agree with you, Farrukh. There's never been a more important time to develop stronger incentives for the world to cooperate, just because of the serious nature of so many shared global threats emerging at the same time.
Absolutely. Now let me bring in Dr. Kortanov. Dr. Saab, Doctor, thank you very much for being part of the program. Let me ask you how Russia at this moment, how Moscow and Kremlin are perceiving the emerging world order. Is it going to be a great power rivalry, or there's still a chance for collective security and all these major countries like your own nation can work together to solve humanity's problems?
Well, my take is that the Russian leadership and President Putin personally would really like to have global problem fixed in a multilateral framework, and therefore he insists on a P5 meeting. Maybe this meeting will take place in New York on the margins of the General Assembly, or maybe in another format. But of course, there are many issues related to this general approach, because the world is changing, the balance of powers is shifting, and definitely multilateralism should also be something different from what it was, let's say, 20, 30, or 40 years ago. The big question is whether the liberal world order and multilateralism can exist without a benign hegemonic power. For many years, the United States played this role, and it's not clear whether the United States is going to play this role any longer. It's also a trade-off between efficiency and legitimacy, because in order to make a deal legitimate, you need to have a broader representation. But the broader representation you have, the more difficult it is to come to some kind of substantive conclusion. And we see many instances when broad meetings generated very hollow decisions that reflected the lowest common denominator between participating states. So it's nice to have multilateralism, but the devil is in details, and we should work really hard in order to bridge the gaps in perceptions, at least between major players. And if we do that, we will make a significant step forward in the direction of a more stable global order.
Right. You actually talked about shifting balance of power, and that is very intriguing. But as a country, I don't think any country has suffered more as a result of the last Cold War as Russia has. And we understand that there are many challenges which might be actually ripping the world apart. But simultaneously, we saw recently with the trade competition between China and America that microchips got very expensive and scarce. Is there no possibility that all these leaders, especially given your country's vantage point, that you can actually play a role in bringing them together and actually convincing everyone that it is important not to fight? Because there are challenges, immense challenges, which never stop. For example, COVID-19, it is still there.
I agree that definitely the tasks are burning, and I do hope that my country can play its role in bringing major powers together and hopefully in reconciling some of the differences that exist between them. However, Russia itself has to learn, has to master the art of multilateralism. I think that it is difficult for big countries to reach multilateralism and to really follow multilateralism, because big countries are used to take leadership positions and they expect others to follow them. You take the United States, and of course you can argue that the United States pursued the approach of quasi-multilateralism because it would be great to have a multilateral arrangement provided that the United States remains in the driver's seat. But this is true for others. This is true for Russia. This is true for China. For centuries, China perceived itself as the Middle Kingdom and all other nations as barbarians. So there is a tradition of, should I say, condescending approach to foreigners in China. So I think that the great powers are indispensable, but I don't think that we should rule out an important role that should be reserved for middle-sized powers and even smaller countries. Take, for example, TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was launched not by the United States, not by China. It was launched by small countries like Singapore and New Zealand, and only later the two giants started to fight about what this concept might mean. So I do believe that we should take this multilateralism in a more democratic way, though again, let me repeat that I would be happy to see Russia playing an active role in pursuing multilateralism and new global order.
Right, and your comments are really on the money. When it comes to actually saving the world from itself, it seems that the role of professors, experts, and preachers is going to be really big in the coming days. Let us see how they actually play their hand. But coming back to the studio, Shakil Rahman, at this moment, I understand that there are voices in every country that keep on talking about a conflict and they keep on pushing for it as well, right? And there might be some lobbying activities behind it. But when you say competition, actually containing a country, is it now, or containing a power, is it actually really about physical power or capacity to restrict somebody? Is it even doable? Or all these countries will have to understand that whatever progress is made because of collective struggle of our intellects, our thinking people, right?
Look, to contain China, is it impossible? Mm-hmm. It is not just that I work on that, that's why I'm saying this. If you look at the facts and figures. Mm-hmm. But before coming back to that, I just want to say one sentence. Mm-hmm. When I look at US behavior at this point of time, mm-hmm. it reminds me the behavior of United Kingdom in 1940s.
Okay.
The way they were behaving, they want to sustain their power as a global power, okay. but on the expense of other countries like USA.
Okay.
But it never happened. Mm-hmm. And this will not happen right now again.
No, but are you telling me history repeats itself?
So, yes, it is.
It doesn't.
No, it will.
I mean, variables are so different at this moment. And UK was an empire.
The way I'm saying, so graduation of one power to power from one power to other power.
Yeah.
So at this point of time, we will definitely see that there will not be a single power at the global level.
When we are looking at the history of the two countries, America, I keep on reading a lot, been reading a lot. Recently, I have tried to read more into the Chinese history as well. And one factor, while China might have a difficult relationship in the past with the West, when it comes to the US, they actually used to get along pretty fine. Before the revolution, even after that, especially 70s and onwards. And they used to call America the teacher. Is there a problem with the teacher, or there is a problem with the student, or then the language has changed?
No, I think the main problem is economic interest.
Okay.
So it is not about who is what. If we look at that...
Whose economic interest? Countries, companies, or something
If we look at from the US or the Western style, it's their companies. Okay. The industrial military complex. Mm-hmm. That is dictating their shots.
Okay.
Look at this point. If we're talking about from the side of China, it's a country.
Okay.
Because they have the entirely different system, they have a different system.
Yeah.
Look at that.
You realize this, right? The fact that you can talk about so clearly about US is because it is a democracy which has transparency, and that actually helps not only
It depends how you define
not
the
only
democracy.
its critics but also itself, because then it is a democracy. It renews itself.
It depends how you define democracy. If you define it only on the basis of election process, yes, you can say they are democracy. If you define it on the parameter of the governance, I think all process democracy of China is better than that election.
Okay,
that is another debate.
I concede that is your right to have
if you want to compare, then we have to talk everything, not just saying that one is democracy and other is not democracy.
No, but I'm saying that their media can continuously report on the weaknesses of their leader, America, right? In America, lawmakers question everything, right?
So they can question
transparency.
No. They can just question which country is responsible for the failure of USA. They are not really looking at that who made money from that. So the trillions of dollars who made.
Have you seen the US media's
Yes,
coverage
Fox
of the
News,
withdrawal
CNN,
of
or
Afghanistan?
these news channels? If you look at they are just running the look at them. They are just start to blame the Pakistan for everything what happened in Afghanistan. No. This is not that selective. There is no selective.
No. You're now talking about Pakistan. I understand there is some problem with that coverage, right? My point is that the day US started withdrawing from Afghanistan, their media actually almost killed their president, kept on criticizing the administration.
Why?
That happened.
Why? It started in the time of the Trump.
Yeah.
But they're saying he was anti-multilateralism.
Okay.
But let me remind you, who refused the Kyoto Protocol?
Okay.
It was the Bill Clinton administration.
Okay.
Let me remind you.
Have you read President Obama's memoir regarding
President
Paris Agreement?
In the modern time, in the modern time,
Yeah.
Pivot of Asia. Who launched the Pivot of Asia? Pivot of Asia.
Yeah.
It was Obama administration.
Yeah.
He was anti-multilateralism. Don't say it's a Trump. It was phenomena. It was a system which were dictating to them, and still it is. No, the right word here. But last sentence.
With due respect, my concern again is that while we can actually look at the competition between the two countries, the argument you were giving earlier was that the two countries can work together, right?
Yes, they can work together. They work together.
It won't happen if we start picking choice sides.
World was a better place when they were working together. Last sentence.
Yeah.
If you look at that, what are they doing right now?
Yeah.
They are bringing back the cowboy diplomacy. Talk soft, but carry a big stick.
Okay, right.
So they are strategizing. B3W.
Okay, let me go back to Michael Kugelman. Last time he spoke a little less. So, Michael Kugelman, does it actually go back to Malthusian economy, that everything is limited, and if a country has to be happy, the other country will have to be unhappy? Or we can find a way to actually work together? This is very important, because every single day I keep on reading pundits who actually argue that one country's victory or actually success means undermining of the other nation, especially the three powers that we are looking at.
Well, I mean, I think that zero-sum look at the world, that zero-sum approach to the world is certainly problematic. And, you could see this in the context of Afghanistan. The idea that the U.S. is left means that China and Russia are going to rush into Afghanistan, and the U.S. has been dealt a strategic defeat. Certainly there are new opportunities for Russia and China in Afghanistan with the U.S. having left, but clearly it's a lot more complex and a lot more nuanced than that. It would be inaccurate to think that China and Russia will run pell-mell into Afghanistan and fill this vacuum left by the U.S. So, I think that, the world is a very complex place, for sure. And getting to the first part of your question, there have been some scholars that have indicated that the fight for increasingly scarce natural resources and raw materials will dominate the global landscape in the coming years, particularly as you have these new rising powers like India and others, as well as China's growing clout.
The European Union as well.
Yeah, exactly. With all these growing economies, there's going to be more pressure on meeting energy needs, and that's going to take the search for these energy needs to far-flung areas, and that there could be conflicts that play out over the fight to secure these increasingly precious raw materials. There's been talk about potential India-China conflict in the Bay of Bengal region over increasingly precious resources. But this is all just, this is all just speculation for sure. Obviously, the scenario that I've laid out has major implications for climate change as well. So I hope that whole idea of the whole world fighting for what's left, I hope that does not play out. And it speaks again to the need for more global cooperation and more multilateralism that ideally would be led by this Biden administration, trying to encourage the formation of new mechanisms and new channels and organizations focused on cooperation, both regional and global, because that is a nightmare scenario, right? When you look at how so many raw materials and energy resources are certainly they're being exhausted in the domestic context, but then globally as well. And then what happens after that? So I think for me, that's something that I've thought about and feared a lot moving forward. It's another one of the many.
Please finish the point. Please go ahead.
I was just going to say that another one of the many justifications for there to be more sustained multilateralism in the world.
Right. I'm told that we are left with limited window of time, but as I said earlier, Dr. Katsanov, that Russia can play a very important role. I'm always fascinated by the country's history. I borrowed Russian names for my two daughters. Let me put this question about zero-sum game to you as well. Is it really that much set in stone? You can actually conclude, and I will take it as the conclusion of the program.
Well, I think that it might evolve into what I would call a rigid bipolarity, and then it would be a zero-sum game. However, I think that it is in no one's interest to see the international system turning into a new bipolarity. It would be detrimental to everybody involved, especially to third countries, because they will be deprived of the room for maneuvering. So I think that it is still possible to make sure that competition will be limited primarily to economic, trade, and technology areas, that we will avoid a major geopolitical, geostrategic, and military competition between the United States and China, and that smaller states will be in a position to pursue the independent foreign policy without facing the need to make a choice between China and the United States, because it is extremely difficult to make such a choice without paying a very high price for it.
Right. On that note, I'm told that we have to conclude the program. Dr. Andrei Kortunov, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Michael Kubelman, always a great pleasure having you in the show. Same goes for you. Shakil Ramesh, thank you very much for being part of the program as well. Yes, you have listened to our participants, and this is a big existential debate that goes on. But what actually really is underwhelming when you look at the overall intellectual pursuits of all these countries, especially published papers, that we are still talking about theories or the atmospherics of 19th century while we are sitting in 21st century. Malthusian economics might be important, but there are always great ways to create new surpluses and solutions that are needed, some new exploration in various alternative energy sources, and umpteen other ways. I mean, we are sitting on a rock in an infinite universe. We can always colonize space as well. But the problem right now is, and if you want to actually have a counterpoint to what we were discussing, the need to work together, if you want to look at how that can be undermined, look at India's policies these days and then India-Pakistan relationship. There are many similar kind of confrontations that might be undermining the collective security ideals that have been expressed by President Biden and in theory by China and Russia as well. Let us hope in coming days we see a better environment, better climate But at this moment, there are factors that keep on undermining the idea of collective security. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.